question a while back in our leadership discussions about saturation. Like
Population.
when can a church be saturation of its population?
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think? What's the percentages?
I thought Blumker finished that conversation. He told us the answer.
What is it?
No, back in the day, I think Lifeway was doing studies. Who is that dude that does all the research?
Kirk Cameron.
It was not Kirk Cameron.
Tom
Anyway.
Rayner.
That's it.
Lifeway is a huge Baptist organization out of Nashville, and they do all kinds of studies and stuff. But I believe they were talking around 10% of your city's population was a tipping point.
Champion said too. Didn't he say 10%?
Your boy Rick.
Who's Rick Champion?
Rick Champ.
Rick Champ?
Yeah.
Oh, I know him by his full name. Richard Champion.
He's now with Jesus. So be
He
careful.
got his reward
God
of being a champion.
bless him.
So,
He said 5, didn't he?
Oh, I thought it was 10. I don't know.
so movement.
So I don't know why we get that number though, because I mean,
How many people live
there's
in
so many
Florida?
people around us that don't
So here's
that
what.
don't have a relationship with Jesus. I don't know why are we. Oh, we're saturated. That's it.
Because, as a person, so if you just take an individual, right, you're who you are and how your manner is and how you, just everything about you, you can only reach so many people, right?
Personally?
The way you can connect. So multiply that out in a body of believers. The way you do church, your style, your culture, everything about who you are as an organization will only have a reach so far based upon your culture and demeanor and everything about who you are. And so that's where that 10% comes from. Is it's more of a stylistic culture that you're building. But the key, the actual Dave Ferguson talks about in his book Hero Maker, is if you can get to 16%, like 16% of your population, you can create a movement. And a movement has the potential to actually go way beyond your saturation rate. But very, very few organizations or individuals can push that 16%.
Well, we need to push for that.
Yeah. Because then there's no limit. Once you hit that movement point, that 16% is a tipping point, and they've studied that throughout the sociological and organizational structures throughout the world, and they found consistently that 16% is the catalyst for a movement.
So would it be 16% of, I suppose, that circumference you're drawing from?
Mm-hmm.
So for the Effingham campus, that's 40,000? 40,000?
Probably.
Yeah.
Lake County campus, that's 15 to 18,000?
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people.
But like I said, he talks about that too. It's very hard to get to that point because you have to in order to get larger, you have to strip away so many of the preferences that you have and get down to the core values of who you are and the core.
It has to be a gospel focus.
Yes.
Because everything else is divided off into sections.
Yep. So this is why it's hard for us, is because we have to strip away all the things that are not gospel centered. Mm-hmm. And so it's going to be, to get to that point, you're like, I have to be okay with certain things as long as they are in line with Scripture, even if I don't like them.
Right.
Style and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the tough part that most individuals and most organizations can't get to.
Well, so I walked this morning from the Radiator air conditioning place, which is by Dairy Queen,
Yeah.
to the church.
Is that what you called?
Huh?
Is that what you called me?
That's why Matt didn't answer. He's like, oh.
He didn't want to walk.
It's
but
not
you
work
didn't answer.
time yet. Not on the clock yet.
Did you have
24 and a
Colin?
half minutes. I didn't pass a single person's house that I knew, and I wasn't passed by a single vehicle that knew me or that I knew them. Nobody offered me a ride in 24 minutes of walking in town.
I get honked at all the time when I'm walking in town.
I didn't know a single soul. And that's okay. But I was just thinking as I was walking along the hallway, some of these people go to other churches, right? I mean, yeah, some of them do somewhere. I walked by a church, and the pastor was there.
Did he say hello to you?
No, but he didn't see me. He was on the inside.
Oh.
If that's the church I went to when I was in college, and I showed up and went inside, thinking I was coming to Christ Church to fill in for the weekend.
Oh,
man.
jeez.
And I walked in, and the guy says, "Well, good morning. Why are you here?" Literally,
I'm
said,
here to
"I'm
preach."
He's like, "Oh, no, you're not." He didn't say that part, but it doesn't.
Can you imagine? Like, he goes, wait, what do I not know? The others would like to talk to you down the hall.
I was thinking as I walked past all those people, it's like, all these people need to know about Jesus.
Yep.
And so this saturation thing's just malarkey.
So,
I mean, sociologically, I get it, but
Yeah.
That's not what God says.
So this
They
is
need- they
why
need Christ.
it's easier to multiply small, like
Sure.
small than it is, because as you grow larger as an organization, your reach actually diminishes percentage-wise. Though you may increase numerically greater, your percentage of actual reach is much smaller.
Why is that?
Because if I go tell someone about Jesus and they come to Jesus, right? So that's 100% success rate, right? How many people does it take for us as an organization to reach one? Probably pretty high. It's organizationally. So if you have groups of people that are doing that, and I mean that is why life groups are so important here, but you do that even on the church scale. A healthy church of 100 is going to have a percentage-wise higher statistic of outreach than a church of 1,000.
That's why the monkeypox is growing faster than other diseases right now, because there was only 28 people in the world that had it. So if 2 more get it, the percentage goes up.
Well, that is true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I get what you're
Podcast is going
saying,
to get
but
flagged.
I think that's the problem with the way we have viewed church, though. The church doesn't reach people. People reach people.
Yep.
And as long as people are sharing the gospel, it's unlimited.
Correct.
That's why it's dangerous for people to view the church as an institution, as the disciple-making body.
Exactly. If it's all centralized, yeah, you are pretty limited, and I
Right.
think you can reach a saturation tipping point.
Yeah.
But if each of us is just reaching our neighbors,
So, but here's where we always get in the rub with this. So let's just say, because this happens, we have people in our life groups currently that don't attend here on a Sunday because of preference. Like they love their group, they love getting together with them, but maybe they don't like the music, they don't like the style,
I
and
don't
so
like the preaching.
Definitely the music.
yeah, maybe. I mean, seriously, whatever.
Hate it.
Some
Which is
people
fine.
like the liturgical, but we've made church to be all of that,
True. True.
and so people will not connect. What we would even say as outlined as like fully connected or fully devoted, because they're like, hey, I want to do life with these people. I want to learn to grow in Christ, but like I don't like the music or whatever, and so they don't connect.
But at the end of the day, that doesn't matter.
Right.
If they've accepted Christ, that's what matters.
It's just how we measure it.
Yeah.
And there's always the balance.
Yeah.
That we are always going to struggle with. Because we won't necessarily always be able to measure the decentralized, aspects of groups and leadership on the outside, what's happening during the week. We tend to measure what happens inside one day a week.
Well, and that's why I think that the higher the ratio goes to where people are coming in through personal connection and group versus they just show up at church.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Those just show up at church people have church in the background
Yeah.
somewhere in life. But if they show up at group, because of a relationship connection, that's unlimited.
So I just got back from Panama doing this training for pastors there, and we had 10 different churches that were represented there, and they started reshaping how they think about church, because most of the Latin American churches are pretty small, like 30 to 50 people, right, that show up on a Sunday morning. And we've been helping them transition into this idea of intentional living through groups and giving them some structures and things to think about with that. And what we've seen is churches that were 30 or 40, 50 people going into life groups of 1 or 2 life groups have had this incredible movement type thing where, one church we started with, they now have 12 life groups in the last year. So they've started a new group in about every month. And yeah. And so they went from about 50 people that they would call church to over 400 now. They're not counting their Sunday morning, they're counting their groups now.
So it sounds like the Book of Acts.
Yeah.
That's the only way you can turn the city upside down. They weren't building buildings and meeting places that fast. They're just expanding houses.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're meeting in houses, garages, parks, cafes, and so that's catching on. And, we're going to be, Sean and I are going to go to Argentina, and we have 15 churches we're going to be training there while we're there. So, yes, saturation rates are only viable for what we consider here in the West of a traditional structure organizationally.
So what you've been to a lot of places
Mm-hmm.
around the world. What is different in those places as far as how they do church? What does that look like as compared to the way we would do it in America?
Well, a lot of times the resources there to pull off a good worship service just are not a reality, at least in the churches I've seen. But there's 2 things I've observed. One, here we try, if we're really honest, some of our identity comes from building these great places where people connect. They don't have a great place to build. There's not like awesome buildings that they're building, so they could really care less about that. The other thing is our schedules. One example is our really good, and he's actually the national director of Costa Rica now, Jose. He might be at the church building 1 or 2 hours a week. He's in people's homes. He's with his leaders. Like, he is constantly in the lives of people, and his mindset of how ministry works, and it's a different culture, but ministry is like being in people's lives and empowering people, equipping people, just constantly. It's like he goes from one to another to another. That's his day.
He's not spending 20 hours to develop some way to share Hebrews 11:20.
Nope.
Right, and that's what I was going to ask. Is he preaching on a Sunday?
Oh yeah, every
Okay.
Sunday. Yeah,
And
well,
how
not
long does
every
he-
Sunday.
How long does he take to prepare a sermon?
Maybe like 2-3 hours
Wow.
tops
And
throughout
it's
the week.
just whatever he feels like the Spirit's leading him to that day?
No,
or?
he has a teaching team at his church. There's 4 or 5 that teach on that, and they sit down for a year, playing out their entire year. Some of the elders of the church preach. So yeah, they'll sit down and plan all that out.
But it's not driven by the production of the program.
Right.
I think that's the deal. Is like the larger a church gets attendance wise on Sunday, it's harder and harder for them to operate like Sunday doesn't exist. Like
Yeah.
I think
Becomes
going back
a
to
consuming monster.
yeah,
Yep.
like you look at all the resources that it takes to make that happen, and it's pretty high, right?
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it limits your reach because you're so focused on that
Yep.
yeah.
So, okay, and you may not know this, but after a service, I think our natural tendency is to immediately go into evaluation mode, especially for us on staff. Like, it's just kind of in our nature to critique ourselves and just
Well,
how
mostly just you.
Yeah. But I don't know where to go with that.
You're exactly right.
But we typically leave a church service and, okay, here's the things I really liked, here's the things I didn't like. Do they leave with that mindset? I mean, are they
No.
evaluating, man, that sermon bumper was terrible. You know, it was in English. I didn't understand a word of it. Or, you know,
I'm telling you, their services. So, I love Jose. I love your church, Jose.
He's not watching this.
He probably will, but it's not like
What are we even?
it's
doing?
not
This is
smooth.
not
You know
even
what I'm
our-
saying? It's rough, right?
Yeah.
The music's rough. There's horrible transitions. Sometimes like you don't know if someone's going to get up there or not. It's the most awkward thing in the world. When they leave there, their evaluation is: did I preach the gospel?
Yeah.
And did people like
But here's
know
the-
about Jesus?
here's the-
And let's go eat and share a meal together.
wow.
Because here's the thing, like
That's about it.
Yep.
you keep people with what you get them with, right? Like we talk about that all the time. They have people showing up because of the relationship.
Absolutely.
And so the relationship is more important than the service. And so when there's an awkward transition, oh well.
Yeah.
Like it's not as big of a
It
deal.
makes me like cringe whenever
Oh,
I'm there.
so but that
I'm like,
gathering-
who's gonna do it?
I know.
Come on.
Well, that's your Western mindset.
I know, and they're just like,
But is that gathering limited in how many people will actually come to it? Because
yep,
they have to come to it because of that relational connection, and that's limited.
yep,
True.
So you need to have a bunch of smaller gatherings in that model,
yep,
which is okay,
yep.
right?
That's what they did. So they started a new church.
And so we're having larger gatherings.
Yeah, they started
Larger requires
More.
more.
because it's less relationally connected.
Yep.
We're just not we don't have specials
Yeah.
on Sunday morning.
Right.
Should we bring those back?
No,
It sounds like what he's having.
they're usually not that special.
Oh, they're special.
But
all right.
if it's your grandchild, it is special.
Yep.
Yeah.
'Cause
And you could care less
oh,
how they sound.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not everybody's grandchild.
Right.
And so you're not going to go watch somebody else's grandchild that can't sing,
Yeah.
right?
At least very often.
No, yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so the larger it gets, the more quality is required. Well, let's jump to, hey, welcome to the ReThink Podcast.
Oh yeah.
We've been talking for half an hour about nothing to do with Hebrews 11.
But that was good stuff.
Yeah, it was.
That's stuff I get excited about.
Give the people what they
green
want.
mustaches.
Gets them every time.
Hebrews 11. We're working our way through the Hall of Faith. And we come today to, this is a tough one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we both had this one. Let me read the verses, and then we'll be done.
I'm just looking for this green mustache.
By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regard to their future. That's it. That's the verse. Next one. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff. That's it. By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions about his bones.
Hallelujah.
And we're supposed to go for 30 minutes on that.
Yep.
What are we going to talk about?
All you gotta do is go read Genesis, 22?
12 through
12.
50.
Yeah, 12.
Where we
50.
start the story with.
So there you go. Just read that.
Read it out loud.
That's at least like an hour.
Super engaging.
Yeah, so I wrestled with, like, super engaging. Do you go back and retell all these stories? Because it's a mess. How do you approach this?
Yeah, I think there's
Well,
two.
how did you approach this?
Yeah,
That's
we're post sermon at this point.
We're
Watching this.
broadcasting this post sermon, but we're recording it pre.
Yeah, it's really just I mean, you could go through all these stories and you'd be going for a long time, but it's what these all have in common is they trusted in the promise of God. That's kind of that's the main theme. That's really the main theme of Hebrews 11. But these three stories, I mean, they couldn't see. So Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau. He knows that God is going to bless that family line. Not really sure which son it's going to be. I mean, it should have been Esau based on the birthright, but by faith he knew that God was going to hold to his promise and bless through his line. So he blesses both of his sons. Jacob, he knows again that through my line the Messiah is going to come. He doesn't know when it is.
13 kids.
Yeah.
Four different women.
Yeah. And 12 of them sold one of their brothers, so they're not great dudes. But he knows God is, regardless of the moral behavior of those children, God has made a promise and a covenant, and he is going to fulfill those. It's not, again, the covenant's not based on our perfect faithfulness. It's based on his perfect faithfulness.
I think, too, as I've been reading through chapter 11, I keep getting drawn back into chapters 1 through 10 and this idea that Jesus is better. Yeah. Jesus is better than, like, all these dudes, all the prophets, all the, everything. Jesus is better. But these guys are examples to us. These stories are examples of faithfulness that points us to Jesus.
Yeah.
Points us to the one who has been promised. And God is the one who has been working all of this out through the entire time. Yeah, despite our failures, despite our faithlessness, he's been faithful the entire time. And here's some examples for us to look to and be encouraged by, of like, hey, they had something bigger in mind. Yeah. That's why they took these steps. Yep. These are actions of their faith.
Yep. Well, and again, Hebrews 11 is not, the whole purpose is not trying to highlight these guys, mm-hmm. or these men and women. It's really to say, hey, they trusted in one who was perfectly faithful. Yeah. So the hero of Hebrews 11 is God. Yeah. It's a reminder that even through all of these stories, and you get to some of these, and they are jacked up people.
Jacob is
a mess. He is a mess. But God has been faithful through all of them. And so, yeah, we got to make sure as we look at the Hall of Fame of faith, we often think, man, I cannot be like these men and women. No, actually you are. Because they're jacked up. You're jacked up.
Hallelujah.
The hero is God.
I finally got Ben saying this every time.
Let's wrap this up.
You got to figure out a way to say it in every single sermon, though. That's the key.
Jacked up.
So
You do that well. And I think I've done it in the last 2.
Good.
So
discipleship
learning
at its
from
best.
You. Yep.
Faithfulness. I picked up, though, these are all 3 stories of the end of their life.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and so their lives are filled with ups and downs, but
mm-hmm.
they're at the end of life, and they're passing along faith. Yeah. At the end of life, when you start assessing what really matters, faith. What's next? That's out of my hands. It's out of my control. It has to be trusted totally in what God's providing for me, and so by faith, they end life. Yeah. Right. I read a story. Actually, later wrote a book. Funny, Ware, I think is her name. She was a hospice nurse for several years, and she would have conversations with the hospice patients, and ask them what it is in life. You're coming to the end. We know you're coming to the end. It's all been laid out before you, and what do you regret? What do you regret in life? And it's interesting. She has 5 things that they come back to. I won't go through all of those, but at the end of life, what really matters? Is God good with his promise or not? Because if he's not, you're done. What next?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Regrets. The number 1 regret was that I tried to fulfill somebody else's, make somebody else happy with who I was instead of just being me. I thought that was interesting. Number 2 was, I wish I hadn't worked so much. I wish I'd spent more time with family. Interesting. But yeah, they're all at the end of life, and so I think they're all put in here together. These 3, because they're similar stories. They're messed up. They're jacked up. Their life is not, again, particularly Jacob, not models of life by any means. Their families are a mess. I've got a flow chart that
of course you do, Jeff.
I printed this off somewhere. I'm going to try to summarize these stories real quickly, but look, what a crazy family tree. Zilpah, Leah, Rachel, Bilhah. Come on, Jacob. What are you thinking?
Yeah.
That can't work. Abraham has Keturah, Sarah, and Hagar. It's a mess. Jacob, Tamar.
That was a bad deal.
Yeah.
That's a sick story.
Yeah.
right? It's, daughter-in-law dressed as a prostitute, doesn't even know. That's pretty intimate. Doesn't even know and gets her pregnant. Good grief. Yet, through that line comes Jesus.
Yeah.
Who's that story about? God is faithful.
Yep.
We were in our life group last night, and we're working through Philippians, and we got to chapter 3, and Paul says to watch out for evildoers, those that defile the flesh, and dogs. Not in that order. Anyway,
Yeah.
we were talking about what's he pointing to. Well, he talks about the answer. It comes next. He talks about he's really pointing quite ahead towards Jesus, obviously. But we started talking about living in a world where evil is rampant, right? Like we see that on the news, right, all the time. And we're talking about it, and we were outside in the backyard, and my oldest was up on our playground set with another kid in the group, and they're reading through the Old Testament kids Bible, like page by page or whatever. It's picture by picture. They're little, and I stopped and I was like, like we're over here trying to figure out how do you live in a crooked, messed up world, and it's like that right there. Like you just keep pointing back to what will help our kids grow up. That.
Yeah.
Like, so it's just a reminder that like even in the craziness of bad situations in a bad culture, like God is still faithful and he's still working, and our responsibility is to be faithful to him.
Yeah.
And make him the priority. Easy to say.
Yeah. Yeah, I think throughout these stories, one of the things that is so different than our culture is this idea of like generational thinking. That was a big deal to them. And you think about Abraham, and Abraham was probably a Babylonian, and so not a kind, caring culture, like just evil men and women. And yet through that, God has plucked him out of that and revealed himself to him, and then he could have just stopped with him. It could have just been like, well, this is who I choose to follow. You live your truth. But no, he was adamant about thinking of generations to come. And even though all of these stories are really messed up, they all consistently are thinking generations down the road. And I just think we stop short of that. I think we'd like to instill it in our kids, but really don't have much thought of even going further than that. Maybe your grandkids, because you may see them, and then very few your great-grandkids. But what you do now, the faith that you have, the way you raise up your kids in Christ, that and prepare them to share that too, that has generational effects. And I'm not that old, but I am getting to the point of life where you do start to take more inventory of those things. And I'm thinking, man, I want the Farley line to be known as ones who follow Christ. And so I want to have that generational thinking, but often we stop just what's in front of our face, and I want to think bigger than that.
I guess I want to make sure that I don't think about it at the end of my life,
Right.
But I'm thinking about it sooner than that.
Yep.
Because you're right, Jeff, like talk about like what matters most. And it's that faith you instill in your kids.
Living so it's not a regret later.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
The imagery that come to my mind was passing out a baton, relay race. Run as fast as you want, but you drop the baton, you lose the race.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think we can easily see these guys are all connected back to Father Abraham.
Yeah.
And that generational element is connected to they're a chosen people. They're a unique nation. They are a family that has been called out by God to live in distinction. There's a uniqueness there through them. Because through that family is going to come this blessing. And so the generational connection leading up to the coming of the Messiah is that's their connected point.
Mm-hmm.
But can we not see the same thing going forward because
Yeah.
the Messiah is our connecting point, right, for eternity.
Yeah.
And so if we could just prioritize that, the number one thing is not, is my kid going to play MLB or,
Yeah.
is he going to get a D1 scholarship? It's, can we pass along Jesus?
Yeah.
That's hard. I'm at a different stage. My kids are now adults. First section of kids. Now adults, starting to have kids. And it's like, you look back and you think, what did I model right and what did I model wrong? You can't change it.
Yeah.
You can't go back and redo that stuff, but that matters. How you pass on faith. It's a big deal. And ultimately they have the choice. I look at this lineage and I think, on my flow chart, they went all kind of different directions.
Yeah.
And you can't always blame that on mom and dad.
Yeah. Right.
Right. So, but it's the responsibility that you bear. Pass it on. That's heavy. That's every parent's heart, though, right?
Yeah.
Right. Well, thanks for joining us on the ReThink Podcast.
Got real emotional at the end.
Yeah. What that's about.
I didn't get that emotional.
Surprise, surprise. So I don't know how much of that early conversation you're going to put into this podcast, so we may have to go back and reintroduce, welcome you to the ReThink Podcast, so we can tag that on to the beginning. But thanks for joining us.